Welcome back and thank you for staying with KTN Prime. We continue with our conversation on reproductive health issues. With me still, Dr. Kireki Omanwa, President of COGS, and Kenneth Juma, Senior Researcher Officer, APHRC. Now, before we went for that break, we talked about the issue of contraceptives, but we equally had talked about the issue of post-abortion care. From your study, Ken, how equipped are our facilities, our health facilities, when it comes to handling post-abortion care?
Yeah, thank you so much. So what we found from our study was that our both public and private facilities really are very less equipped, suboptimally equipped to attend to women who need post-abortion care. As a matter of fact, among primary facilities, so primary facilities are the level 2s and 3s. This is the first point of care for a huge proportion of women, close to 70%. Only 18% in Kenya could provide all what is considered basic post-abortion care, and that is really basic. It's like stopping bleeding, administering IV fluids, removing retained products of conception in a post-abortion context. So only 18% in the whole country could provide what is known as complete basic post-abortion care, and there were significant gaps in delivery of these services at this level. Again, among referral facilities, which now are the last resort, if you go to a level 2, level 3, and you cannot get the service, you'll be referred upwards to a level 4 or level 5 or level 6. Level 5s and level 6 are very few in the country. Those are the county referrals and the 3 or 4 national referral hospitals that we have. But among the level 4s, only about 24%. So only 1/4 of what we consider as our referral level facilities could provide comprehensive post-abortion care. This includes life-saving interventions, administering blood transfusion, conducting a surgical procedure that perhaps involves, based on the complications that Tari explained, opening up the woman to correct whatever had gone wrong there and putting them together. So, which is a huge missed opportunity that even for patients that are referred upwards, there's no guarantee that they'll be able to receive this important life-saving care that they should be getting from the health system. So that also, contributes to the amount of mortalities that we see that are linked to unsafe abortions or complications that get worse that would have been treated otherwise. But because care then delays, because then you have to bounce from one hospital to another until you're lucky enough to get the hospital that has the service. And in between that time, those delays worsen. They aggravate the complication that the woman had, and sometimes they lose their lives, unfortunately.
Okay. Dr. From all that we have said, perhaps for me, I'm wondering how effective then are our reproductive health policies? Because there seems to be gaps almost everywhere, for lack of a better way of putting it.
I think you put it well.
Okay.
That there are gaps. There are gaps. There are no gaps in good guidelines. Good guidelines we have, by the way. But there are gaps in, number 1, human resource. Number 2, there are gaps in medications. Just like what Ken said, only 18% of the public facilities had a full complete of things which can be used to help these women post-abortion care. Number 3, we have problems with blood. You said some of these women need referral to level 4, level 5 hospitals. As a by the way, in Kenya we collect about 600,000 units of blood, and that's about 60% of what we need. We need, and now, out of those 600,000, we collect 400 and something thousand, which is about 60% of what we need. Out of those 400 and something thousand, 75% of that blood which is collected is used by women. In obstetrics and in these, abortion complications. So we have issues with blood. We have issues with ICUs because this patient can actually come to that referral hospital. We do all these things that we need to do to save her life, yet we don't have an ICU. Or we may have a caricature of an ICU where you have a building and then it is not equipped, or you may have a building which has some equipment, but there is no personnel.
Okay.
And then commodities is also a challenge. So the issue is not the guidelines. The guidelines are beautiful.
Perfect.
But now, how do we marry the guidelines with all these other things, these pillars, which can be able to help this mother? As we were talking about this report, we have a WhatsApp group. One of my colleagues gave a case which was brought to his hospital. And he said he was called and sees this lady. And of course, this lady is in a horrible, it's an emergency situation. She has been brought by somebody else. This is somebody's wife. The husband is abroad and she's pregnant. So they tried to do an illegal abortion. It didn't work. And when my colleague opens the abdomen, guess what he sees inside? There were twins and there are two heads of the babies in the abdomen.
Oh, no.
So they had perforated the uterus. They had somehow decapitated these babies. And then apart from that, they had multiple injuries on the intestines. It took them over 8 hours to correct this mess. But thankfully, they saved this lady's life.
Okay.
That was in a private hospital. Now, how many public hospitals have this capability or have this? They have the human resource, they have the medications, and by the way, I just want the public to know that a huge percentage or good percentage of the medications that we use are actually fake medications. And that has been proven. There's a study which was called Emotive, where we are talking about postpartum hemorrhage, and some of the batches of the medications which were tested, they were actually fake.
Okay.
So we don't have quality medications, we don't have proper human resource, we don't have blood, we don't have ICUs, we don't have commodities, and so on.
Okay.
And then the personnel is poorly paid. And then we have 4,000 doctors who are not employed. I mean, it's a myriad of these things, and which have, I think, can be sorted out if we have goodwill of the national and county hospitals. The issue is not guidelines. The issue is out all these other things. Absolutely.
Okay. Ken, coming to you, I mean, earlier on you say that we need to love our mothers, our women, our girls, in general, the gender. We need to love it for us to be able to implement what's right. Even as we try fix that at perhaps a constitutional or a law level or policy level, we need to have these conversations. But as a country, as a society, how do we do that when there is religion, there is perhaps fear or stigma? How do we begin having such conversations? Yes, we're having it right now. But perhaps there's someone out there who is like, why are they talking about this particular conversation? We need to make it common. We need to make it a normal thing, but how do we go about it?
Yeah, they say necessity is the driver of innovation.
Yeah.
Sometimes, having seen the figures, it compels really everyone. And really, one of the overarching findings of our study was that all types of women have abortions. Notwithstanding education, uneducated, married and unmarried, employed and unemployed, young and old, okay? So given the magnitude of this challenge, it really calls or behooves all of us to engage in this conversation and at all levels. So when we continue to bury our heads in the sand, and that's sort of what has happened before, where abortion, is left because it's sensitive, so no one wants to address it or talk about it or discuss what are the possible way forwards around resolving this challenge. And as we continue doing that, a lot of lives are being lost, unfortunately. So there's need to, based on the data, really, and that was sort of our motivation to releasing the findings, that people then have constructive and objective conversations that are guided by lived experiences that, Dr. Ari has just very ably illustrated, of what really happens in the front lines as they interact with these women who are coming with their lives hanging, thin on the thread. So do we still want to continue in that situation where time and again, young girls and women are dying? And you see, by the time you see a woman at the hospital for post-abortion care, that woman has debated themselves, so many times, whether is it really necessary, because they see appearance of the hospital as exposure. People are going to know that I did this thing, and so they actually do it as a last resort, and that last resort is because they've felt or perceived that their own life is now at risk. That's when they pull themselves together, and actually agree to come to the hospital. And the doctors now are left to deal with a situation that is so worse. So to prevent these droppings, from the cliff down and being picked by the doctors, being brought up, I think we need to begin by basics. Age of sexual debut is quite early. So how do we address that challenge? Unintended pregnancies are so many. Okay, access to contraceptives. Daktari talked about the range of options. However, the detail he provided is rarely provided in facilities. Why? Because there are few providers. As you noted, there are very few providers at the hospital, and yet there's always a long line. So how much time does this one provider have to provide a comprehensive explanation on what are the appropriate or available family planning methods? They don't have that time. So you'll be there and you have very limited time to even ask questions if you have, because there's a long line already waiting outside. And remember, it's one person who is also burnt out, so it's a compilation of challenges that I think we need to address. So apart from unintended pregnancies, then we come to sexual gender-based violence. Still is a huge problem that is, remains unaddressed properly. We have golden policies and guidelines on what should be done. However, again, the policies do not necessarily translate to practice. So I think we need to get serious in terms of how to address women's health in general. Budget making process, how much is put to women's health issues, the commodity challenge. We depend a lot on donors and partners to support the Ministry of Health as well as the counties in acquiring supplies. Yet, what is the role of the national government in ensuring that these supplies are available at the hospital? Because there's a cost benefit in investing in family planning. For instance, for every $1 that is invested in an effective, modern and effective contraceptive, there is a life saved. You even gain money. There's money gained in return, because there'll be no unintended pregnancy that leads to someone being admitted and off work for a number of days. So if we have those type of conversations, then perhaps we can convince people at Treasury to invest more in health, because health is an asset rather than a liability.
I just want to chip in something which is burning a bit on this. When we talk about maternal health, there's something else which we also need to remember, is what is called maternal mortality ratios. How many women die out of every 100,000 women who deliver in this country? The government says it's 355 out of every 100,000. International organizations say our numbers are a lot higher, around 530, 590. Now, 30 to 40, some say up to 60% of these deaths are preventable because of postpartum hemorrhage. Now, when you talk about post-abortion complications, in that data, it actually accounts for 4 to 13% of these maternal deaths.
Okay.
So if we were to, prevent them getting pregnant, they have the knowledge, they have proper knowledge, because knowledge you can get from anywhere, but proper knowledge and which they can understand. They have options, of contraception and so on. And we were able to reduce these numbers, unintended pregnancies and, unintended or illegal abortions. We are going to have a dent on our numbers, that 355. If we take 10% of that, that is 35. So we'll have done, about 300. We'll have reduced our maternal mortality ratios to about 320, which will be a huge, huge number as well.
Okay. I want to know what role men have to play in this particular issue. Of course, not you two, because you're already playing your role. But looking at society in general, what role do they need to play?
Men... You want to go first?
Yeah, you go first.
Okay. Men are very, and I speak from privilege as a man. Men hold a very important, position and role in the lives of women, and even in the health and well-being of women. They can act as supporters. They are the financiers of access to services. They are the moral supporters as well. They also hold this authority sometimes, that even women who are educated sometimes cannot access family planning methods because their husbands are not willing.
That is true.
And that ability to negotiate even with education sometimes is not there. So engagement of men is so important and being brought to the center of some of these issues, because they sort of, the word I want to use is they reorient the pathways of women in accessing services. Sometimes a woman can access, let's say family planning, but because the man does not want, so she has it for a period, she discontinues, has it, discontinues.
Others even do it in secret.
Yeah, absolutely. Clandestine use of, family planning is quite common as well. So, and when they're using it clandestine, it means without the endorsement of the man, they have to, do a lot of machinations and sometimes discontinue, because it can also cause a lot of havoc in the family. So I think involvement of men is very important.
Okay.
And even as we have these discussions, our role has always been to make sure that men are at the center of the conversation, so that they're not left behind and, with the notion that these are women's issues. These are men and women's issues.
Okay.
Men.
Yes.
They are perpetrators.
They're part of the problem.
We are part of the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, because women, they can't get pregnant by, pollination.
Yes.
So men are part of the problem. But apart from what Ken has said, and I think men also play a central role in some of the bad cultural practices, whereby, in some societies, once a young lady has reached 13, 14 years, has had rite of passage by having FGM done, she's ready to be married, and they get married. So they're getting married to these children, and as soon as they get married, they are off, they're pregnant, and they come to hospitals, they are 14, 15, 16 years pregnant. They are children, their bodies are not yet ready, physiologically to deliver, and they have serious complications. So men are central in this. So we cannot run away with it. We cannot run away from it. So I think the thing we need to talk about, we need to bring men on the table, and it can't be men only. I think we need to start right from primary school and start from the home. We cannot run away from that. We need to bring everybody on the table, religious leaders, educationists, influencers, what we are doing now, the fourth, is it called the fourth estate? The fourth estate, and so on. So it's a conversation, as Ken said, it's a conversation we cannot run away from.
Okay, another conversation we cannot run away from is that the generation has changed. How we were dealing with perhaps millennials or boomers and those that came before is not the same way we're going to deal with Gen Z, Gen Alpha. I mean, when we were taking a break, we talked about this, the fact that we've gotten to a point where these young women do not even fear pregnancies anymore. For them, they would rather even get AIDS than pregnant, which is still not okay. How, even as we talk about the wider picture, how do we start addressing this? Because I believe this is a generation that was taught about reproductive health issues. I mean, I was taught about it, though in secret, but I really was. So I'm sure they're aware. How do we deal with them?
So there's a huge generational difference between the era we live in now and the era of the past. Growing in the HIV era, we were mostly guided by those scary images and threats. And sometimes, overhyping situations to threaten you to be subdued and be disciplined. Fear, actually. So fear worked in the the era of the millennials. However, I say there's a generation difference because this generation have no fear.
Zero.
They are very bold. They have different risk-taking tendencies. They are also super empowered. Whether with the right information or the wrong information, they have very strong perspectives, and they have, unfortunately, a wide variety of sources of information. Some of them unregulated, that they can, seek information from. So, all these sort of environmental shifts have created a profile of adolescents today that are totally different. But I think there's still an opportunity to guide and protect them. There's a lot of controversy, though, around comprehensive sexuality education. Just the terminology evokes a lot of, opposition. However, in countries like Canada, comprehensive sexuality education works, especially when it's delivered in an appropriate manner. Age-sensitive, as they say, culturally sensitive, and, enough dosage for the right age. And so that as they grow for each level, there's just enough information that they need to know. right from when they're toddlers. These are your private parts. No one should touch you here. When you are showering, you should be, closing the door. When you are dressing, this is how you dress. And for the boys also, as the Dr. was saying, they also need to be taught how to protect girls, how to protect women, so that they're not, using force and masculinity, the negative masculinity. So this age group, I think CSC really could be an opportunity packaged in the right way that is acceptable to everyone, and not only delivered in schools.
Okay.
Because there's a huge proportion of young people that are also not in school, or they were in school but missed it there, so they're outside here, who still deserve that information. Okay. Because otherwise they get into this environment as we have now, unprotected. Yeah. And you see, sexual debut begins so early. On average, by around age 11, 12, someone is already aware of sex. By around age 13, as data indicates, they're already beginning to have sex.
Yeah.
The median age of sexual debut in Kenya is around 16, which means that perhaps around 11, 12, 13, they're already beginning to engage. And so they're engaging with very limited protection. And that is some of the drivers of the poorest indicators. So Kenya and most countries in sub-Saharan Africa have the poorest indicators of adolescent sexual and reproductive health. High HIV infection, high unintended pregnancies, FGM still a menace, child marriage a menace, adolescent pregnancies and adolescent pregnancies are a leading cause of maternal mortality. An adolescent is 5 times more likely to die compared to their counterpart at age 20 and above. So a cluster of all this really call on us to leverage on CSC that can, reach all categories of, adolescents, wherever they are, including in churches, really, yeah.
All right, Dr. I'll let you have the final word. And even as you give your final word in like a minute or so, what advice would you give to parents? Because we've had the conversation of sexual education before.
Yes.
It's a no-go zone for majority of the households. What advice would you give them? Because as you've said, these women are introduced, or young ladies actually, these are not even young ladies, they're children,
Girls.
Are introduced to sex at a very early age.
Correct.
We have cases of mothers taking their children to get contraceptives. I mean, there has to be a right way of doing it.
Those are actually difficult decisions. If a mother decides, let me take this young lady and sign that I actually agree for her to have contraception, I think she must have, she must have dwelt on it, she must have thought about it, and, put it on a scale and say, you know what, at her age, it is better for her to use contraception than to come home or can go and have some, illicit, illegal abortion, and plus the consequences that will come with that. Now, what do we need to tell parents? I think parents need to be parents. Parents need to be parents. I think we have reached a place where some of these responsibilities, where we are living today, it's not like, let's say, where our parents came from, maybe our grandparents, where society actually took care of some of these problems. I never sat down with my father to talk to me about, about the fairer sex,
Yes.
whatever it is, and so on. But you would get an uncle, a cousin who's older, and so on, who would actually sort of guide you in this process. The same with ladies. This is the way you behave. When you start having your periods, you are in a dangerous zone, and this is how to behave in front of men. We have to have this discussion. This discussion has to come back to the sitting room, to the dining table. And unfortunately, instead of the dining table, having these discussions on the dining table, this is what we have on the dining table. Unfortunately. Or we are fixated on the TV. Not a bad idea, but that can be also be limited. But the parents have to take an initiative, and it has to be a bold, because these are our children. What would you rather have? This serious discussion, which can be embarrassing at the beginning, or you want to have a phone call which comes to you and tells you, you know what, your daughter is in such and such a hospital and things are not good. I think the choice is obvious. So let us bite the bullet. Let us talk about these things. If they are not able to do that, let them find somebody who can be able to do that. We have churches, we have mosques, you know,
Counselors.
we have all these counselors.
Yeah.
I think the opportunities are there, but I don't think we are making good use of them.
Okay.
And also I think the church plays a central role here. It's damaging when you say 91% of them profess to be Christians. I'm saying profess because you say they're Christians. Because those are two different.
They identify as Christians.
Those are two different things.
Okay.
And the church can play a huge role, a central role in this.
Okay.
So parents, let us be parents.
All right, I think that's a really good place to end this conversation tonight. But of course, it does not end here. In our own way, our viewers, ourselves, we have to keep this we treat it as a gospel.
Absolutely.
A gospel that we have to keep on talking about in order for us to change the bad in our society. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And it's a good thing we had gentlemen to have this conversation. So I hope next time when I invite you, you'll come running.
The perpetrators.
The protectors. And the protectors.
And the protectors. Okay, so you're double P. P squared.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Kirekio Manwa, President COGS, which is the Kenya Obstetrical Gynecological Society, and of course, Kenneth Juma, Senior Research Officer at APHRC, which is the African Population and Health Research Center. That's how we wrap things up for you here on KTN Prime. Thank you so much for staying with us till the end. I'm Ashley Mazuri on behalf of Jesse Rogers and Marisha Witi. Have a good night.